Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So we want to bring you something hopeful and helpful for your everyday life, whether you've been following Jesus for a while or you're still trying to figure out exactly what you do believe about God. Now, you'll find on this podcast things that'll help with conversations about marriage and parenting and mental health and work, practical things to help you in your faith journey, and a lot more. So whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the hopeful and helpful conversations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Ridge Podcast, and welcome to December. It's probably not a surprise that December and Christmas in particular are a pretty big deal around the Ridge, and one of the reasons why it's such a big deal is because it's the time of year where people are most open to trying out church and most open to following Jesus, particularly if they're invited by someone that they know and trust. So we want to make sure you have everything you need to invite someone to join you so that they get a chance to experience the hope of Jesus. But when should you invite someone? How do you make sure their experience is a good one when they do come? Well, I went back to the vault of podcast conversations, and I want to share with you a conversation that I had with Oak Creek Franklin campus pastor, Forrest Anderson, where we talk about just that and some more things to help you invite someone to join you for our Christmas Eve services. Here's my conversation with Forrest. Christmas in general. Are you a Christmas guy? Do you like Christmas? I know we have a couple staff members that, they're not Christmas people, which is a weird thing to be a not Christmas person in the church. But how do you feel about Christmases?
Dude, I love Christmas. I love most holidays in general. And our family is a huge Christmas family. Like, I think it's my wife's favorite time of year. Even my youngest is 9. And so she's in grade school. And she was just running around yesterday, just talking about how Christmas is her favorite season. She loves Christmas carols. We've got one of those like countdown to Christmas calendars that she moves every day. And I think she's got now 5 different Christmas lists that she's put together for us.
Yes.
For Christmas gifts. She's constantly seeing things, and she's getting good though. She's actually cutting things out of the newspaper now, or the magazines or articles, and then putting them on the pieces of paper. But she forgets that the individual pictures don't have the store names. We just get this picture of like this random trampoline or something.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you try to go on Amazon and like reverse image search, like, okay, how do I get this thing? But
you know me, I'm a tech guy. I reverse image search.
Right. Things. Yeah. sorry. Asking wrong person. Yeah.
I still pull up the phone book to figure out what store I go to.
What's a phone book?
It's this when people need a haircut, you sit on when you're little.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, hey, so I know do you guys have like for Christmas, do you guys have a Christmas tradition like of like church at all growing up or anything like that?
We did. So my dad, on my dad's side of the family, they grew up pretty churched in the Methodist faith. And so every year, my dad grew up in the Madison area. And so every year we'd go to Madison for Christmas Eve. And it's when all his family came into town from all the places, actually from Washington, where you're out in. His family would come in from Washington to hang out, and his family from Madison. And we always went to like an 11 o'clock service. It wasn't quite like that, the midnight mass, or whatever everybody calls it, but it was a late service. We used to go every year. And then as the kids got older, like my nieces and nephews would sing in the choir. And it was the church that my dad grew up in. So we actually went back to the church that my dad grew up in every Christmas Eve. And so that was kind of our tradition growing up. Right now, working in a church, the tradition is I'm here all day long, every day during the Christmas season. That's kind of our new tradition. But yeah, I mean, from a church standpoint, we did that on my dad's side of the family. Nothing really on my mom's side of the family at all.
Yeah. Would you guys ever bring people with you or anything like that?
Occasionally, like it was more or less whoever showed up at our Christmas Eve event. And so it's like,
gotcha.
Like I brought a girlfriend with me, or, brought my now wife Tracy with me, or kids, as we got older and we had, I was carting kids along with us, or if anybody had kind of a boyfriend or girlfriend, that was probably the guests, or maybe some people in the neighborhood every once in a while, but not a lot. There wasn't like this idea of I didn't grow up with this idea of you brought people to church with you, period. Just wasn't something we did. It was just more or less.
How is that shifted now?
Dude, now it's, I think it's completely different for me because I wasn't necessarily invested in the church when I was a kid. It was just something you did, right? You went to church just because my parents went, or it was Christmas Eve. You know what I mean? We just went to church. And it wasn't until I really became a follower of Jesus later on in my life, and that I really got this idea of, man, I want people to have this relationship aspect of Jesus. And my heart, I think, started just growing in the love of people. I mean, I always thought I loved people. You know what I mean? Like I like being around people. I'm a people person. I'm typically not alone very often. You know, but it wasn't, I think, until became a follower of Jesus, and I started growing my faith, that I realized, okay, no, I love people and I want the best for people. And the best for people is Jesus in their life. And when you start to understand that, I think it was a game changer for me.
Yeah. I mean, talk about the impact, right? You think like, okay, I love being with people versus what can I do for someone? You know, I think there can often be this kind of misconception about, oh, I want people to know Jesus because it's like a rule of my faith, you know, versus no, I want someone to find Jesus because I know that their life is going to be significantly better and more meaningful if they do, which is a very different perspective, I think. So Forrest, how is your perspective about inviting people to church kind of changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it, I know I think it changed once I started becoming a follower of Jesus. And I think one of the reasons it's changed is because of the way that I think as you grow in your faith, it's the way that you look at people. I think people mean something different to me now than they did before I was a follower of Jesus. I think I was always a people person and thought I loved people, but it wasn't really until I became a follower of Jesus and really had a heart for people, what was going on in their lives, man. And the fact of how much God has changed my life and how much being a follower of Jesus has impacted my life. And the better life that I've got now because of that, and looking at other people and saying, man, I want the same thing for you. And then also knowing like, I can't do that. Like I'm not the one that could change their life. Now I could do some cool things to help, but God's the one that really has to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think coming up to my life and understanding what that was like is, or the impact that you can make in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
By just a simple invite. It's huge.
How has that changed how you just kind of like talk to people normally? I know that you've mentioned something to that effect previously. But
yeah, I think one of the things that changes is the way that you listen to them. I think when you're sitting there and, you know, you're sitting there and having a beer or a cup of coffee or, you know, a meal with somebody and you're listening to their stories, you kind of, before I was a follower of Jesus, it was just more or less, hey, you know, all right, you got that going on in your life. Cool. You know, if your kid's struggling with that, all right, you know, there's counselors at school for that or whatever. Right. You know what I mean? Like I never really thought of it as like, okay, it's my problem. That's your problem. And so I think becoming a follower of Jesus has really made me an empathetic person. Now, not that I'm the most empathetic person in the world. Sure, I got a long way to go on that one. But before that, man, I was, I've always struggled with selfishness and being a selfish person. I think you always kind of look at yourself and the way things impact you. You're not always looking at other people. And I think just one of the ways that God has changed my life has helped me to be empathetic and look at other people with this love for them that he has, that I never really had before. So I think that really changes the way you have conversations with people. You're actually listening and engaged and trying to figure out, okay, really what's at the heart of what you're struggling with right now, because I want to help you.
The answer might be no, but do you feel like that listening changes how or when you might invite someone to come to church with you?
Oh, 100%, man. 100%. If you're not listening to people and if you're not engaging, and I think it's not just listening to people, but I think it's just listening to the environment you're in. I think there's something unique about, okay, not just what are they saying, but what are we experiencing together in that moment? And what is God or the Holy Spirit saying to me in that moment? So I think there's more than just listening to that person. It's also listening internally to what's going on in you. And then also, man, like, what's the environment you're in, and what's happening in the environment that's around you. I think you kind of got to take that all. Got to take that all in. I mean, that's what you're listening for. It's not just listening to the person, but it starts with listening to them and hearing what they're actually saying to you, for sure.
Is there anything that, like, is there like a sign? I'll ask you for both sides. So, like, is there something where someone shares something and you're like, okay, I need to invite this person, versus the opposite, where you're like, wow, the invite would be the farthest thing at this current moment, and hopefully we'll get there. But
I think the one thing you listen to is openness, right? Okay, so when I'm having a conversation with somebody, and let's say they're not followers of Jesus, which I love hanging out with people that don't go to church. It's one of the things that I love to do. It's just, I don't know, it's a part of who I am. I didn't grow up in the church, and I like to hang out with people that are like me. And so a lot of my friends, a lot of people that were like me, just are, they don't go to church. So when I'm sitting there and I'm hanging out with them and I'm listening, I think you listen for that opportunity is, okay, were they struggling with some of the bigger pictures of life? Not just saying, okay, today I lost my keys, so I got upset, and so this happened. But you kind of look at for some of, like, when they're struggling with, like, the big picture questions. And when they're struggling with those types of questions, I think it's really easy to say, hey, man, a really cool way to explore what you're struggling with is coming with me to an environment where we can just have conversations about that. Or we could learn about that, or we could learn, or just hear somebody talk to them about that. So I think one of the things you do is you talk about some of the benefits of the church without mentioning the church, right? So one of the benefits of the church is, being in a group of people that are asking the same questions you are. I mean, that's a benefit of the church, is the community that you get out of the church. So you can invite them to be a part of the community, not saying that it's necessarily the church yet. I mean, eventually you're going to say, yeah, okay, it's going to be at my church.
Yeah.
Right. You've got to get to it. You don't want to, like, bait and switch them.
Yeah. You don't want them arriving on a Sunday and they're like, wait a minute, I thought we were watching the game.
Yeah. What you want to do is you want to talk to them about what we're experiencing and the benefits of what we're experiencing, not the fact that it's a building called the church. And I think that gets at the heart of really what people want. So whether it's, hey, man, I listened to a guy the other day speak on what you're struggling with. And he really made some great points that helped me with that. Dude, I'd love to share that with you, or come experience with it. And he's talking about week 2. Like, if you think about, how churches do series, at least our church does series, and it could be a series on hope or anxiety or something that people really struggle with. And you hear week 1 of that, and then week 2 usually builds on that. There's another idea with week 2, week 3, and so on and so forth. And if you hear, like, week 1, and then you're having a conversation with somebody and you hear that they're struggling with something that maybe that next week's message was going to be about, you're like, hey, man, I heard this great speaker and he talked about this, and I'd love to go with you and do that. And I think, once again, with a person too, you're not inviting them to something on their own. Again, you're inviting them.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about the inviting them with you. Is that like, so you mentioned, like you said right there, you're not having them do it on their own, but is there anything you do as they arrive, anything like that like is super helpful?
Oh yeah. I think one of the things that I always do, well, even before they arrive, is I always kind of entice them with, hey, man, and then we'll go to lunch afterwards, or we'll go grab, beer afterwards, or we'll do something afterwards. So it's not just we're going to this event and that's ending. Because I want to go to the event and let's talk about what we heard and stuff like that too, because I want them to feel that this is just a part of living life. This is not just one event you come to. But yes, when they come to the church, man, I want to be outside. Either a couple different ways you can do it. You can either be outside, depending on how fearful you think they are going to be walking through the building, and you get that when you have a conversation. When you finally get to the point that you're inviting them to a church,
right,
you'll see their reaction, and then maybe they'll talk a little bit about what their fears, or maybe they won't, but you'll see their reaction. Their reaction is just push away. You want to be outside, or you want to drive them, go pick them up. You know what I mean? If you go pick them up, I think that's a great way to do it, but you want to bring them with you to it or wait outside for them. Or if you know that they're going to be okay walking through the doors. And like here at our church, we have coffee. So I think, if you know that they're a coffee drinker, go grab a cup of coffee, wait for them at the door, right inside the door, be the first person to greet them, so that they know they're not alone. I think that's one of the biggest keys is you don't want people to feel alone.
Yeah.
And it's scary and intimidating to walk into a place when you're alone. So how can you make your presence with them known that, hey, I'm in here with you. I'm feeling the same things you are. I am, I'm a coffee person in the morning and I know you're a coffee person. So let's have coffee together as we're walking in this door. I know you're a foodie. So after services, let's go to this new great restaurant. You want to, say this is not just an event I'm sending you to get fixed yourself. How are we doing this together?
Yeah. I'm hearing you say like two, I think really important, really cool pieces. And that one is like the whole all encompassing thing. Like, hey, you're my friend and I'm not just having you come to this thing, right? But this is a part of my life. I want you like one involved with it. And I think it'd be really impactful for you. And two, putting yourself in their shoes, like, and for people that have been following Jesus their whole lives, that might be super challenging. People that are super comfortable being in a church building, that might be a super challenging thought process. But you almost have to assume in some cases, like play the worst case scenario, right? Because, oh no, you're too welcoming. But if someone has this mindset of they think they have all these assumptions about what a church is or a church building is or what people are going to be like in there, you're putting yourself in their shoes, which I think is super valuable. And I mean, definitely changes how we act, right?
Yeah, I think so. I always think about it as like, okay, you're inviting them to your home. And think of your church as your home. And when you invite somebody over to your home, do you just let them knock, let the doorbell go, right? And never show up at the front door and wait for them?
Yeah.
Or is the door open? You know what I mean? Like if you know it's somebody that's really good, the door open, then you greet them at the door, or, you've got, your front area clean. You know what I mean? So they got a place to put their shoes, a place to put their jacket. You know what I mean? Those types of things. When you invite somebody into your home, you're putting yourself in that person's shoes. And it's the same thing when they walk through the building of a church. If there's things that that they're going to fear and be awkward with, even inviting them into your church, you could steer them away from those things. If they know that there's something that triggers something in them that you've had a conversation with them about. So both on the negative and the positive side, I think it's always putting yourself in their shoes. It's about them.
Yeah.
It's about how God is using you for them. It's not about you at them.
And you could probably say that about 10 times more so I can finally get that in my head. It's not about me. Yeah. That's really good. Does any of this approach, does any of like the ask, does that change around Christmas? Because I know we got Christmas services just coming up.
Yeah, I think the opportunity at Christmas is just huge. I think this is the time of year when you think about the world right now, right? I mean, you're in Seattle, Starbucks. What does Starbucks have on their coffee cups right now? Some sort of Christmas display.
Peppermint mocha,
right?
Man.
I know they went away. I know they went away from that for a while, but right now they have some sort of Christmas display on it.
Yeah.
Everybody's advertising all over the place Christmas, right? On the radio, on the TV, toy shopping, gifts, like everything is centered around the idea of Christmas, and it's a Christian holiday. So people have this tradition of Christmas and they know about Christmas. They don't necessarily know about every other thing that we do in the church, but they know Christmas, and they typically, even people who are atheists, understand the fact that most people go to some sort of church during Christmas. So it's not a huge stretch to get somebody who doesn't go to church normally to walk through a door of a church on Christmas, because it's kind of not necessarily an expectation that's been set, but it is a norm, right? It's even a cultural norm in post-Christian societies that during Christmas, things are going to happen. So this changes. I mean, it's a game changer. It's a huge game changer. It's by far the one time of the year that people are more willing to walk through the door of a church, besides tragedies and when disasters happen.
Sure.
People do that too. But I think Christmas is the time of year that people are so much more open to walk into the door of a church.
That kind of makes me think of your last thing that you're talking about with kind of understanding their perspective. Because I know that I've
been at enough Christmas Eve services to know a lot of people have like their expectation for like, okay, this is how I'm going to go through and I'm going to experience it this way or whatever. They have their own traditions, and sometimes it's trying to go through, if any of that makes sense. But it's like pausing and being like, once again, even this Christmas Eve service that I really like and enjoy is not about me. It's about this person that I'm bringing with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's great, because I think too, you see most churches are designed that way, right? So you see, I mean, typical, more of your, modern churches, I should say,
Sure,
are designed that way. They are more guest friendly, and hopefully your church, as whoever is listening to this podcast, hopefully your church is designed that way. I know here at the Ridge, we're designed that way, that our Christmas Eve services are designed to be guest friendly, because we know that we've got maybe one shot, right, for people to walk through our door and want to come back again. And so I think a lot of churches design that way. So I think that also helps as you invite people to church. You know that typically on Christmas, it's not going to be a church service that's going to push people away.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if your church is doing that right.
Right. All right. So super practical question.
Yeah.
When do you invite someone to Christmas Eve?
Man, I think it's hard to put a specific when on it. I think it's obviously after you've already developed a relationship with them. Not saying that just walking up to some person randomly and inviting him to Christmas Eve service is not going to just entice them to go to Christmas services, but mostly it's a small personal invitation.
Yeah.
That of somebody that you've already got a relationship with, that you've already gained some trust with. You know what I mean? The first thing you've got to do is you've got to gain some trust with people before you invite them to anything, before they're going to trust saying yes to anything. So I think it's those people. It's who's that person in your life that you've already got some trust established with, that needs the hope of Jesus. And then when you're sitting there and you're having that conversation with them, and you feel that moment where, okay, they're open. Or when you feel the Holy Spirit just prompting you.
Yeah.
I mean, like you don't have to necessarily call them up and do it or be sitting next to them. You could send them a really nice personal text with a digital invitation or something like that. But you want to personalize it if you're going to invite them. It's got to be personal. Can't be just like a blanket advertisement sent to them. Like, it's got to be personal. Like, hey, man, love to see you there. Love to be there with you. I know that this is a tough time of the year for you. You're struggling. This is something that's helped me. Once again, how do you attach it to something that's going to happen in their life because of them walking through the door?
Is there how much notice does somebody need? Like, would you do it when this will be a couple weeks before Christmas when we start doing this, but is it like as much notice as possible? But you mentioned, I also, sorry to circle back, I'll answer that question again. I do really like what you're saying in terms of like, you're listening for that. You're listening for the opportunity. You're not just kind of like being passive in it. You're listening for the opportunity and openness to that. And you're kind of asking God, hey, God, when is it right? So I think it's easy to kind of just like not invite people because it kind of just like falls into a normal rhythm. But if we're looking for the opportunity and we're asking God, hey, would you create an opportunity? It kind of changes things.
Yeah. I think it's huge.
But then, yeah, like, I'm assuming like the more notice, the better, right? Am I off base here?
I think that's a good way to think about it. But I think too, it's, the people, right? If you're investing in this person, are they a person that needs a month before they can do something? Like, I've got a buddy that I'll send a text to and I'll be like, hey, you want to get together and grab a cup of coffee? And you'll be like, yeah, here's 3 days in the next 2 months I've got available because I've got this hour here, because I'm so busy, right?
Yeah.
That person is not going to be a person you can invite last minute to anything. And then you've got the people like me who don't necessarily schedule every hour of their life out, that you're just like, I'm looking for an opportunity where I can connect with them and then invite him right at that moment. And that could be 2 days beforehand. It could be a couple hours beforehand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think typically it's got to be intentional. So you've got to look at that person. I think what you said about asking God is huge, man. You got to pray, okay, God, open up the opportunity for me to be able to invite this person, open up that person's heart so that as you ask, that they're more willing to respond and say yes. So I think getting God involved is where you got to begin. You got to begin with prayer. And then as that's happening, you've got to be intentional about listening and watching for that moment. And you know those people, you know what they need, and you know the timeline that they need. But yeah, don't just try like Christmas Eve itself going, okay, I got to invite somebody, and then go start randomly texting everybody in your contact list, come to church, which I think so many people do.
Well, it comes back to that whole relational aspect, which I love.
Yep.
Great stuff, man. Is there, well, okay, before I let you go, I have to ask this because you're my food guy. Christmas Eve dinner, or do you guys do maybe Christmas dinner?
Yeah, baby.
What's on your menu?
All right. So my menu's always got to start with roasted meat. Like it's got to be roasted meat of some sort.
I'm done. You're good.
Yeah. So, and it's usually beef. Christmas beef is for us. Although one year I did try to cook a goose. I tried to do like that Dickens Christmas where it's Christmas goose. And tried to cook one of those and completely destroyed it, man. Only time I ever tried to cook a goose and just destroyed it. And we'll never do that again. But yeah, it's usually like, a roasted tenderloin or prime rib. Last year I smoked a prime rib. But it's usually, once I've done like a whole New York sirloin, like New York roast, that was good. So usually typically go to is some sort of beef, and we do a lot of appetizers. So we do a ton of appetizers and then a nice piece of meat. And so there'll be like, last year we had like egg rolls and all sorts of goofy like things you wouldn't expect.
Yeah.
Like
what? Like
tons of finger food and then a nice piece of meat and some sort of salad.
Dude, you made me want to fly back to Wisconsin just for that dinner, man.
I love it. Anytime, man. Dinner's always open. Dinner's always open. My door is always open to many people. I love it.
Well, thank you so much, Forrest. Really appreciate it. Well, that was my conversation with Forrest, and I want to invite you to head over to our Christmas webpage where you can get all the details on our Christmas Eve services so that you feel confident inviting someone to join you for Christmas at the Ridge this year. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any hopeful and helpful conversations.